Services in Angular provide a layer of abstraction for our components to kind of pull away from the excess logic of the network traffic. You remember how our React components would have pretty long fetches if you had to handle some excessive logic in there. Angular in services gives us a way to take the business logic, that real heavy network reliant asynchronous stuff, out of our actual component and lets us use it whenever we need it and whatever component might need that information. So to get started with that, we're going to use the CLI to build us a service. So I'm going to pull mine up. Let's see, and I'll cd out of the API into my book client. I'm going to run a dir and make sure that I can see all of my Angular files before I run the next command. And that's going to be nggs services/database. And when I run that, Angular is going to give me two new files, the database service.spects that can be used to test my service, and then the actual database service.ts. So let's go ahead and collapse our terminals back down and get started on building our new service. If I scroll down, I can see I have a new services folder, and in here is my service file. Alright, so the first thing that we need to add to our database service is going to be the link to our database. And we're going to store that here in a private DB capital URL. I set that equal to HTTP localhost 3000/books. Now, keep in mind, localhost 3000 is where my server is running at, and /books is how I get to my controller. Yours might be a little different. You might have to play around with it. Don't forget to check out your server console to see if anything's wrong there. Now we need to add the HTTP client. So in our constructor, in the parentheses here, let's add a private HTTP capital HTTP capital C client. Then I can import that. Not from there. From @angular/common/HTTP. Cool, that looks a lot better. Now, to actually get to use the HTTP client here, we have to pull it into our app module. So open up your app module.ts. And then here in providers, we're going to supply not just our HTTP client, but also the database service and the HTTP client. I can auto import that. And auto import that one. Nice. So now we are actually setting up two providers for our entire application. I believe I said earlier that you can think of your app module.ts as like a brain for your whole app. It's like a hub. So if we can supply HTTP client and our database service here, it means that we can supply it to the entire application. So let's save that. And let's go back to our service. And let's import our book model. So we'll import book from, go up a level, models /book.model. Nice. And we're bringing that model in here so that we can actually use that as a way to format and kind of check the type for the data that's coming back to our server, or coming back from our server to our client. So under the constructor, we're going to add our getBooks method, because once again, this database service is going to handle that asynchronous logic that's going to connect the front end to the database. So to start getBooks, we're going to add lowercase get, capital B books, and we're going to set its return type to observable. Then we're going to open up a set of angle brackets, and we're going to add a book, and then some brackets here at the end. And then we're going to set up our curly braces. So let's break this down real quick. We have the name of this method, getBooks, and its return type is observable, book, some brackets, and kind of a weird syntax. So right here, the observable is actually kind of like a data wrapper, or not necessarily a data wrapper, but it wraps data. More specifically, a data stream or like a return. It doesn't have to be asynchronous data, but it has to be some kind of information source. And it's also a generic type, which means that it has a kind of parameterized data type. So we can give it a book array as a type, and then our observable will check to make sure that our data is an array of books. So let's finish off the function by giving it, our method, by giving it its actual code to execute. And we're going to add return this dot http dot get this dot http dot get book array, open up a set of parentheses, this dot db URL. Real quick, let's go ahead and import this book, our observable. So let's import observable from RxJS. RxJS is the package that supplies us with the usage of our observable here. So then let's look at this part here. Let's look at this return. So the getBooks is going to return this .http, which if we look up at our constructor, this .http is of type HTTP client, which is kind of like the baked-in version of fetch in Angular. So we used to use fetch in vanilla JavaScript and in React, and in Angular, our HTTP requests are handled out by this HTTP client. Notice we're actually calling it .get off of that. Then we're also passing in the kind of data we want back, and then we're handling, setting up some values for this request by passing in this .db URL at the end here in parentheses.